Yeah, I mean, I've always advocated for peaceful, civil protest. Protest is fine. You know, there are lots of ways to protest. Writing a letter is also a protest. Um, Posting on one of the social media sites is protest. Showing up is protest. So I wouldn't discourage people from doing that. I do think, though, that a focus on changing policy in Washington and a broad endeavor to go after comprehensive immigration reform is what protesters, at least as things have diminished, the activities of ICE have diminished somewhat, that's a better focus of protest and of speaking out. But I'm not going to discourage people from showing up and protest. I think that's one of the best ways in the United States to get your message across. Again, peacefully.
Our civil division fighting sanctuary cities every single day. Our attorneys are working on terrorism, TDA, MS-13, Antifa, President Trump. We've charged more than 500 defendants with assault on federal officers thanks to your directive.
Yes, I was an advocate for the bills, protecting our immigrant communities across the state.
Well, I view this, as I said, as an expansion of the Trust Act, which I think is having a detrimental impact on immigration enforcement in our state. And of course, that's what the purpose of the law is in a lot of respects, not only the bill we're talking about, but also the Trust Act. And it's going to make for some of the issues we're seeing in the city of Chicago, where law enforcement isn't able to work with federal law enforcement, isn't able to work with local law enforcement in that immigration enforcement measures, where it's creating scenes that are chaotic and it's causing issues for those who are enforcing federal law. And I think this will cause an expansion of that, where our local law enforcement officers aren't able to help the federal officers. One other provision of this bill that it talks about any person designed toward federal immigration enforcement, but our U.S. Constitution, of course, has a supremacy clause, which will mean that this provision, as it relates to federal law enforcement, will quite possibly, in fact, likely be unconstitutional, meaning that the only law enforcement officers who are going to be subject to penalties under this will be our local and state law enforcement, which I feel creates another problem, and we're subjecting our law enforcement to these possible penalties at a time we're having a difficulty in recruiting law enforcement to work in our state. Now, as it relates to how the Trump administration and state government will interact, I think it's just going to be one more barrier for us to see the law enforced as it should be in an orderly way, and will potentially create other arguments to be made that actions taken by the federal government beyond the normal law enforcement actions would be constitutional or allowed by federal law.